5 minutes, which, if you've presented, sometimes that's actually harder than talking about something for 45 minutes or an hour. And so to get all the best nuggets in 5 minutes, that's what we're going to do. We'll have 2 5 minutes of fame presenters. They'll stop right at 5 minutes, and then we'll run an exchange where you get to ask them questions and dive into some of the things that they discussed. So that's what we're starting now. I'd like to introduce our first 5 minutes of fame panelist. Her name is Jenn Reid. Jenn is the Director of Learning and Development for Grant Thornton. Experienced learning and development leader with a proven track record in facilitation, instructional design, and managing learning teams. She's results and people-oriented organizational development consultant, specializing in change management, values, and culture definition. Please welcome Jenn Reid to the stage.
I'm going to do my best not to trip and fall with this microphone. I'm used to the Beyonce style one with the... Thank you very much. I will do my best to give you some good nuggets in the next 5 minutes. I'm going to be talking today not as Jenn Reid from Grant Thornton, but as Jenn Reid, a member of the Board of Directors for the Institute for Performance and Learning. I wear 2 hats, and today I'm speaking from the volunteer side of my life. So the Institute for Performance and Learning, some of you may know it, some of you may be members. I know there's a few people in the room that definitely know it. For those of you who don't, feel free to come and chat with me afterwards. But it is Canada's professional association for learning and development professionals. We've been around for quite a long time, but we actually used to have a different name. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is a little bit of the story of how we got to where we are today, some of the lessons that I think I've learned in the process, and what we're doing a little bit differently now to move ourselves into the future. So what is in a name? Well, I can tell you, it is no small thing to change an organization's name. Way back when, we were known as the Canadian Society for Training and Development. CSTD. And when you say CSTD really quickly to people who don't know what it is, CSTD sounds a little bit like a disease. And you struggle with that sometimes when people don't know what you're talking about. That's not the reason it's probably one of the reasons we were looking to change the name. But at the time we were thinking about the name, we were thinking that we were a little bit behind the times, talking about that T word. When we talk about training, it feels like it's a little bit outdated when we're talking about learning and performance in the future. So there was an urge, a need to rebrand, to change who we were. We were the oldest, and still are, the oldest and only national member-based association devoted to the development and certification and performance of workplace learning. So we wanted to maintain that, while also signaling that we were moving forward, moving into the future. So there was a 5-year strategic plan that was launched in 2014. We started making some progress on that plan, and one of the big initiatives was the rebrand. It was to move us forward into the future. We launched that new brand September 21st, 2015. I remember doing a launch party here in Toronto. We had a boat cruise out on the lake. We were talking a lot about what that metaphorical journey of leaving the water and leaving the dock. We had a swear jar for every time you called it CSTD. We had a lot of fun changing that name. And for the 50 or 60 people who came, I think they understood why we changed the name. I think they understood the rebrand. But the big mistake we made, not everybody was on that boat cruise. We did events across the country, but not everybody understood why we were changing. Not everyone wanted to change. Not everyone really understood the value of wanting to show that we were moving forward into a new sort of life, a new existence. To get to the name that we chose, there was a 6-month process with an external consultant. We thought we were doing everything right. We had representatives from the board of directors, from local chapters. We had a couple of people who weren't really involved with the local chapters or the executive. So we thought we were really getting a good, diverse opinion. I'm thinking now we were probably bringing a lot of ketchup and mustard to the table. And we had some ad hoc conversation with members. So we really did think we were doing the right thing. And I'm not going to say to you that I want to go back to CSTD, because I still do think that that acronym has a bit of a problem with it. But I think we could have engaged our membership in a much better way. So we became the Institute for Performance and Learning, and we said at the time that we didn't want to go to an acronym. We didn't want to be known as I4PL because we wanted to be talking about the full breadth of the name. We thought that every word was important in what we had chosen. But really, we became that acronym because that's what people do. So we learned that our members cared deeply about our organization. They wanted to be involved and connected, and they didn't really understand it. So fast forward to where we are today. Our strategic plan is old. We're renewing it now. We're working through what the next 5 years are going to look like. Our mission and vision felt a little bit dated, so we worked through that, came up with a new purpose statement. And we wanted to better engage our members this time around. So this is the big shout out to Thoughtexchange, because that's what we did. We engaged our members through an exchange. We had 90 participants, 110 thoughts, 2,662 ratings, far more consultation than we had when we first rebranded with our new name. And we got some great ideas out of this. What we are currently working through as a board in my last 8 seconds, we've come up with the 4 biggest themes that came out of that exchange for us. We are working through what it means now to connect with our chapters, to develop these courses and personal certifications, and I'm getting the bell. So I'll leave you with that. But I will, just to wrap up, I'll just say that I think the way we are going about things now, the lessons that I've learned from this, we are far more engaged with our membership, and we are making sure that we are making those connections count. Thank you.
I love that. I think there is a metaphor there for not everybody was on that boat cruise. So I'm going to start saying that. Okay, I'd like to welcome our next 5 minutes of fame panelists, Kristen Harcourt. Kristen is the executive coach and speaker and consultant for her own company. As a graduate of McMaster University, having attained her honors Bachelor of Arts in Sociology and Psychology, Kristen did her coach training and certification through the Coaches Training Institute and is accredited through the International Coach Federation. She has developed a high level of intuition, fierce courage, and empathy, which leads to powerful coaching sessions. Please welcome Kristen to the stage.
Okay, and where's my 5 minutes? I'm gonna take that. Okay, I am ready. Okay. So last weekend, it was the morning, I was getting ready in the kitchen, and I was looking at my cell phone, quickly responding to some text messages, and my 6-year-old came racing into the room, and he said, Mommy, I have a story to tell you. And I said, yeah, just one moment. And he gave me a couple more seconds, really about 10 or 15 seconds. Mommy, I have a story to tell you. And I said, yeah, just 2 more minutes. Anyone else relate to doing this when people are trying to get our attention? Yes, the kids. And so I sat there, and then he came running up to me. He took the phone, he put it down, he grabbed my face really, really close, and he said, Mommy, I want you to stop what I'm doing and look at me eye to eye. A lot of wisdom from that little guy. And that wisdom can be applied to what we see in our organizations as well. Because while we might not have people in the workplace running up to us and saying, hey, look at me, eye to eye, people are feeling that way as well. Because people want to feel heard, they want to feel listened to, they want to feel connection. And here's what I've noticed, and thank you, Joan, because you had a really good segue earlier, is I find in the organizations what's happening a lot are people are in the doing, going, meaning to meaning. So many things are pulling you in all of these different directions, and there's not a lot of time for the being, not a lot of time to connect to yourself. Ask yourself the important questions. Why am I doing what I'm doing? What's important? Is this aligned with my values? Is this aligned to my purpose? Michael was also talking, and thank you as well for the examples of your kids, where you're feeling like you're being pulled in all of these directions, and what are the priorities? Well, how many people in this room would say that they give themselves every day or every week time for self-reflection? So this is what normally happens. Usually about 4 or 5 people put their hands up in the room. And I think this is a lost opportunity because it's so important to give yourself that space to be asking yourself what's important. And this is where the priorities really start to show up. Because are you giving yourself time to really invest in yourself? Because we say we're really, really busy, but busy is actually saying that the priority of giving yourself space to invest in yourself and to ask yourself the important questions is really actually not that important. So I would challenge everyone in this room to create that space for self-reflection, to ask yourself the question, what are my values? What is my purpose? What is my vision? Where am I going? The next thing I would offer you is getting feedback. So we might think we're doing everything really, really well. But when we start to go and have questions and ask people around us how we're doing, what we could do better, people are happy to give us feedback. And sometimes in the workplace, it's not going to happen right away because it takes time to build trust. So I would say a great place to start is ask your significant other, because they're always really happy to give you tons of feedback. And it's just sitting there and having a conversation and asking them, like, hey, what am I doing really well? What could I do better? How could I better support you? As you start to have those conversations, you start to have specific things that you can be working on to be able to improve. Now, also, when we think about our organizations, how many people have a really structured program around leadership development and have coaching and mentoring and personal development available for all your leaders? So this is what I see as well. I see that there's not enough support available for leaders so that they can have that opportunity to get to know themselves better. Because the more that they know themselves, the better that they can be leaders and support the people around them. So another thing that I notice is that there's not a lot of people that are willing to ask for help. So let's be honest for a second. How many people in the room find it's really easy and you love to go out there and ask for help all the time? No, because it's hard. It feels vulnerable. It's not easy to acknowledge that you do need help. But when you give yourself that space and ask for help, now you have that opportunity to get to know yourself better and figure out what those priorities, because sometimes priorities are about saying no to things that previously were yeses because you can't say yes to everything. So when we hear those priorities where there's 15, 20 priorities pulling you in all of these different directions, it starts to be actually those other of that list of 20. Really, when I get honest with myself, 5 are those top priorities. So what I'd like to leave with you today is, what action can you take? What can you start doing more of? And what can you start doing less of? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kristen. One of the great things about that is I think, Jenn talked about engaging with her organization more, and Kristen really gave us some nuggets about how you engage with yourself more. One of the wonderful female leaders in our organization, Michaela Becker, she says she stopped using the word busy. She doesn't say, oh, I'm too busy. She says, oh, I'm not prioritizing that right now. And I thought that change in language was so powerful because it helps you get really real with yourself about how you're dividing your time. So I would challenge you to use that as well. So now that we've done that, we're going to do our next exchange. We're going to ask you to go into your agenda again, find your 5 minutes of fame section, click on that blue link. If you need any help, raise your hand. We've got lots of people here to help you. But really, this is where we want you to think critically about the 5 minutes of fame panelists, about what Jenn and Kristen shared with us today. What do you want to ask them about? What do you want to dig deeper into? And then we're going to invite them back on the stage to go through the exchange, go through your feedback, your questions, your thoughts, and they're going to address those together with you.
1, 2. Check 2. Check, check.
Okay, while you're sharing and starring, we're going to just show you a quick little peek at the ways that you're engaging with one another. Each of these people here, these little purple people, they represent you guys going in there, sharing thoughts. Each of these blue dialogue boxes is, of course, a thought. Yes, good luck with that. I'm going to have you guys pass this microphone back and forth as we answer the questions. Okay, we're going to switch over now to the top thoughts. We're going to see what your priorities are as a group. And so Leah's going to bring up our top thoughts reports, and we're going to start there with those questions. This is great. This is a great first one. How do you say no when the person asking thinks this should be your number one priority? Who wants to take that doozy of a question?
That's a great one. So it's hard. It's also it's a case by case. So it depends what's happening in that situation. What's the relationship you have with the person in front of you? But it would be with talking about, well, why is this really important? This is what I have going on right now, and having some really strong open communication with the individual. So I would be asking some more questions around, why is this an important priority? And be really honest and transparent. So I couldn't say in this particular situation, this is what you should do, but I think the more that you can be honest and have transparent, open communication, the more you can work something out. Sometimes it might be around your boss that is asking you for things all the time. So what does it look like to sometimes push things back? It would be helping them to understand, these are all of the different things that are on my plate right now. And right now, all of these things are being seen as priorities, but I can't be working on all of these at once. So what truly is most important? And that sometimes is a really good conversation to be having with you and the boss or your leader to get that clarity, because sometimes it starts to become clear that you're being pulled in so many different directions because they're not really actually clear on what those top priorities are.
That's really great, Kristen. Thanks. Jen, what do you think about that? How should you manage something like that?
Can I just say a big ditto?
Ditto, yeah.
I think for me, especially if it's coming from my boss, she's great about saying she's a relentless prioritizer. So if she's asking me to prioritize something above the other things that I've already got on my plate, we have a relentless prioritization conversation.
That's great. I think the big takeaway from that is really just digging in, using that as a starting point to ask more questions, and then relentlessly or ruthlessly prioritizing. Lovely. Tough to be vigilant about being present when faced with full schedules and demands from the organization. How do you help create a culture where vulnerability is okay? I think that, with the rise of Brene Brown right now, this is on the top of everyone's mind. Vulnerability is becoming such a great buzzword for us to really lean into. How are we creating spaces as leaders in our organization? How are we creating spaces for that vulnerability? Love to know that from you ladies.
So I think one of the pieces around vulnerability is, first of all, helping people understand, and Brene does a great job of this, and I would give every leader the Dare to Lead book to help them understand what is vulnerability and what is it not, what's not vulnerability, because some people's concept of what it means to be vulnerable is not vulnerability at all, and it's not the kind of conversations you actually want to be having. I think the more you can have leaders having time for coaching and mentoring and self-awareness so they can learn more about themselves and why vulnerability is important, and then being able to model that in the organization. So leading by example is huge. So the more you have those senior leaders that are showing up from that place of vulnerability. I've talked with CEOs that I love. They're sitting in a room and they'll admit, really big mistake that they made last week, and they wish they had have done X, Y, Z. They wish they had handled that better. And or even the boss talking to another employee. As leaders, you're saying, hey, this is what I did yesterday. I didn't really handle myself as well as I should have. This is what I would like to do differently next time. So the more vulnerability is being modeled. The first part of the question, which is about how do you stay present when you're having to run around in multiple meetings. We could have a whole conversation on meetings and when meetings should be meetings and when they shouldn't be meetings. And I love the concept of having 45-minute meetings so that they don't end on the hour. So you have that space to get recentered, get present before you go to the next meeting. So I would say there's an onus also on the individual on what are you doing to help yourself be more fully present. So giving yourself every hour, taking a couple of breaths. It's crazy how our breath, I always say with our breath, it's available to us 24/7. So if you just take a couple of deep breaths before you're going into a meeting, allowing yourself to get more centered. With some of the organizations I work with, even in the meetings, there's a rule, as they start the meeting, they'll say, let's take a couple of minutes to take some mindful breaths to get present and get recentered. Some of them also have rules where you're going into a meeting. It's a no smartphone zone. So there's baskets outside of the meetings where everyone puts their smartphones and then go into the meetings, so that allows them to be fully present and engaged with the people around them. Last thing I'm going to be a big promoter of is meditation. So the more you can do, and Des is even saying, you don't have to be the perfect meditator, but just trying and working at it. The more you're giving yourself that space to do meditation consistently every day, starting your day like that, it allows you to be more mindful and present throughout the day.
I'll share 3 quick tips on the being present piece, and 2 of them I'm stealing directly from Brene Brown, so I'm glad we're talking about her. One of the things that I love that she suggests in the Dare to Lead book is giving pink slips at the beginning of a meeting. So giving people pink slips or permission slips. This is the permission I'm going to give myself in this meeting. So maybe that is, I'm going to not think about the other 5 priorities that are on my plate right now, or maybe it's, I'm going to speak up even when I'm uncomfortable. Whatever that is, sharing that purposeful intention at the beginning. The other piece is directly related to that. It's sharing your intention for the meeting. What do I actually intend to get out of this meeting? And making sure that everybody's fully present and sharing that intention. The third one is really tactical, and it's very related to this thing that was just beeping at me a few minutes ago. I often set a timer in my meetings. And I'm visible about it, especially when it's a one-on-one with one of my team members, saying I'm setting a timer so that we have a 5-minute warning before the end of this meeting so that we can wrap up effectively and make sure that we're on the same page before we walk out the door. That one, it's such a small one, but it works so well.
That's really great, Jen. I think so often when we're at learning and development events like this, having really, a lot of times we talk in theoretical hand-wavy things, so having these practical tips, ladies, is really, really helpful. Thank you. It's so important to self-reflect. So how do you manage a conversation with a leader who says they don't have time? I think we all said we don't have a lot of time for self-reflection, so I'd love to hear some tips and tricks about that as well.
I can start this one, sure. So for me, I mean, I love what you said earlier. For me, it's not about time, it's about prioritization.
Right.
So if you're telling me you don't have time, all you're telling me is that this is not a top priority for you right now. So sometimes the conversation is, okay, I get that you've got a bunch of other things on your plate. When can you make this a priority?
Mm-hmm.
When can you make this the time for what I think is also important?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's a matter of reprioritizing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Kristen, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just would say it's kind of taking that victim mindset when you're approaching it like that. It's a choice. It's always a choice. And I've had clients where they actually write down what they're doing for like a 2-week period, and then they laugh when they see these times. Oh, they had no time, but they were on social media, kind of going through on the homepage for 30 minutes because that was their way of de-stressing.
Right.
So it's like, okay, that's a great opportunity. Instead of de-stressing on your phone, here's an opportunity. So I would say if you say you don't have time, I would challenge you for a week, track where you're spending your time every day, and I bet you'll find time.
Great, that's so lovely. You're right, it all leads back to reprioritization. So this one is really for you, Jen. What did you do with the thoughts shared by your I4PL members? Were they shared publicly, and how did you decide what to do with those?
Yeah, so we're actually in the midst of all of that right now.
Okay.
So we did share the results publicly. We shared them with everyone who participated. We shared them with our membership. So the actual report of the results is available to anyone who wanted to take a look at it. And what we are now doing as a board and as a leadership team, we are looking at those 4 key priorities that came out of the big themes. Mm-hmm. We are working through what that means on a strategic and tactical level. And we have a lot of plans about how we're going to communicate that out on a regular basis and be a lot more transparent about everything that's going on, because that's what our members are asking for.
Yeah, and did you feel a distinct difference? You mentioned the whole, not everybody was on that boat, and then after you did an exchange and you really felt like you engaged your members, did you feel a distinct cultural shift after you did something like that?
I think it's a lot different than just a survey or just announcing something to a group. I think we've really taken a step forward in making sure that we're having a conversation, mm-hmm. as opposed to just saying, here's where we're going and here's why you should come with us.
Yeah.
I would say I think we need to do more of it.
Certainly. Mm-hmm. Yeah. A constant state of improvement in that space. Very good. How do you fit long-term strategy? Kristen, I'm going to go to you on this one. How do you fit long-term strategy thinking into your days, which are largely characterized by putting out fires?
Yes, I see this a lot with HR leaders, right? Because there's a lot of people coming to them all the time with agendas that are the most important. So I think one of the really great things is when you start to block some white space. I love when it doesn't even have to be a lot. Even if you're blocking an hour, 2 hours of white space every week, even more I would encourage, so that you can be working on those strategic priorities and making it so that you're not available at that time. Your calendar is just as important as everybody else's calendars. I think part of it is I see too often in terms of really owning those boundaries. If you're not giving time for yourself and doing what's most important to you, you actually have less to give to everybody else. So it's really honoring that And even when we're talking about time, giving yourself, it's a gift. It's a gift to you. So put in those white spaces in your week. And sometimes they're just going to be things that are really, really critical that you have to leave it. But really put that in your calendar. And it's just as important as you're taking your child to a specialist doctor's appointment. That's how you're really honoring it.
Yeah, and I think long term that white space is not just a gift to you, it's a gift to your team, to your organization, because when you have the space and the time to think strategically about what you're doing, really everyone benefits. Okay, good. I'm glad everyone loved I'm sorry I'm not prioritizing that right now. I hope you all take that with you. If you'll scroll down for me, Leah, so I can see the next one. For Jenn, how are you continuing to communicate with members on work that is tied to the TE feedback they provided?
I think we started to answer this the last one, but I think one of the things was putting the results up. We are also directly engaging with our chapter leaders right now, so I'm the liaison between our chapters and the board, and I'm going one-on-one to each of them to talk through some of the results of this and to see where we need to be taking it. Beyond that, we've got a strategy in place for how and when to communicate even more, engage in more of that two-way dialogue.
Lovely. Jenn, how did your membership feel about the Thought Exchange versus how they were engaged previously?
Some of the ad hoc comments that I was getting from people are that it was a really different way of communicating, a really different way of engaging with them. The people that participated, I think, really enjoyed participating. I think some of the comments I got were, this is so different from that multiple choice survey.
Yeah.
When you send out a multiple choice survey to people, you get a few answers, and maybe you don't understand why they've answered something the way that they have. This provided a lot more rich data for us to kind of grapple with and engage with.
Can you give us an idea of how large your organization is? I know you showed us the stats on how many people participated in the exchange, but I think having an idea of your membership numbers would be helpful.
That is a great question, and I'm hoping Lorianne might be able to answer it.
2,000 people. Lovely. And your distribution method was through email?
Yep.
Very good.
Yep.
Okay, what are some examples of self-reflection opportunities for staff and management? Examples and successes help others buy in. This is great. I think we talked about being an example with vulnerability. I think being an example for self-reflection is equally as important. Kristen, what would you say about that?
Yeah, so I think the leader practicing it and also sharing with their team what they're doing, how it can be really effective. So some questions that I really like, either doing at the end of the day or doing it I like Sundays, so at the end of the day, kind of a week in review, is asking yourself, what were the wins? What went really well this week? Because we can be so quick to run to the next thing, right? It's always go, go, go. What do we have to do next? So really give yourself that space to celebrate the wins. So what went really well? What didn't go as well? And with the thing that didn't go as well, what could I have done differently? And what did I learn about myself this week? And how do I want to challenge myself for the following week, right? And if you're doing on the daily basis, same thing. What do I want to focus on more tomorrow? And then you can have kind of that bigger self-reflection around, for more of the inward journey, what are some of those goals that you're focused on? Instead of being focused on everything, you could say, okay, this week I'm really focused on vulnerability, and be clear on what vulnerability looks like. And then so for all of your interactions that week, you're trying to show up from that space of vulnerability, then you can evaluate at the end of the day and the end of the week, okay, what went really well, what didn't go as well.
That's great. Jenn, do you want to add anything to that?
No.
Okay, great. Would you mind giving these ladies a hand? They did so well. We're so appreciative of everything that they've done. Thank you guys so much. So next up, we're going to have some community conversations. Thanks so much, Leah. And so I'm going to invite Des back to the stage to lead us through that. As we get started with that, you guys, there's going to be some snacks coming out.